about the movement to privatize public schools. What is your vision of the future of education in New Mexico and nationwide? Commissioner Grisham.
We've talked about a lot of really tragic policies that hurt everyday New Mexicans and Americans. And the movement away from our foundation, a strong public education environment, has to be one of the top issues that we all have to work towards protecting and resolving. 4 years ago, I would have said that there is a possibility to take No Child Left Behind and think about a way to stay the accountability components and improve the climate in public schools. Today, I say absolutely not. It is beyond repair. It must be repealed. We've created an environment where we've not only vilified teachers, but now, if it wasn't enough to disenfranchise parents and the community, we've disenfranchised the students. All right, kids don't want to go to school. They don't, there's nothing to learn. They are in an environment where they're testing over and over and over again. And even teachers are now being proposed to be evaluated based on the test scores of their students. And I will tell you, actually, in our legislature, progressive Democrats voted for those very standards that hurt teachers and hurt schools. So when we talk about sort of progressive policies, you got to be clear that you understand the value of public education, that parents have an opportunity to support their children, to do learning and to be engaged and to have a healthy environment. And as someone who's invested in early childhood development, pre-K, school-based health centers, and more investments for public schools and support for peer evaluation for teachers, I tell you that that's an area we all have to stand strong. We must continue to invest in public education. We aren't going to allow that fundamental opportunity. The growth of this nation is dependent on the very education of our children and future generations.
Mayor Chavez on privatization.
I'm against it. My mother passed away this last year, and she was a substitute teacher all of her adult life. Once we were raised, I had a real blessing in that she stayed home as a full-time mom, and not many kids have that advantage. But as soon as we were on our own, she went back to teaching. I am a product of the Albuquerque Public Schools. My parents were products of Albuquerque Public Schools. My kids are graduates of Albuquerque Public Schools, and that's the lens through which I see the world. As mayor, it was the first time the city funded directly Title I for homeless kids. I signed the first Joint Powers Agreement to create community schools in this city. As a legislator, as a congressman, one, I'm going to vote to repeal No Child Left Behind. It's had its time. It's time to move on. And I'm going to work to make sure, and this is something the federal government can do, because it can't do everything in a classroom. It can make sure that there's equality of access and opportunity at the local level. It's a fundamental obligation of the federal government. I'm the only candidate here that's actually started a school, the Albuquerque Institute of Math and Science at UNM. It's a charter high school with an emphasis on math and science, which is critical to this new economy. And guess what? We've had 3 senior classes graduate. Every single one has gone on to college. First time in the history of New Mexico. It is the #1 ranked high school in the state for math, science, and reading. It can be done in a public school environment. I ran for governor, and you all supported me. Eric supported me in that campaign. #1 issue, full-day kindergarten. Gary Johnson was against it. Michelle, you stood silent on that issue. The very next year, because I lost that election, the legislature passed it against Gary Johnson's wishes because he wanted private jails. Tell me what you've done, that'll tell you what you're going to do in the future.
Senator Gallego, privatization.
Well, as the chairman knows, because he was there in these battles, these last 4 years have been tough, especially the last 2 years, because we've had an open assault on teachers, on public education, on increasing class sizes. It's been a war there, and the biggest issue that has been on the table instead of asking the 1% in New Mexico to pay more or closing loopholes, every time is how do we slice and dice public education. The reason why educators and teachers have endorsed me in this race and are standing with me in this race is because they saw what it took for Chairman Mira and me and a lot of our progressive, pro-teacher, pro-education legislators to take on this completely ill-conceived idea, which has the same roots as NCLB. You know, NCLB, and I agree with my colleagues, you know, I wish we could save it. I say we scrap it and start over with something that's actually going to work. You know, my wife's a teacher, so she's my de facto education advisor, and I have enormous respect for her because, you know, teachers get a bad rap, and I think of my own teachers. I would not be sitting here if it wasn't for people who said, look, you can do this, you will do this, don't listen to those folks who say you can't do this. And so the idea that the right has really made this about our teachers, I think, is very, very wrong, and we need to make sure that they have the support they need. It's kind of hard to teach when you have 40 kids in your class, 46 graders in some classes. It's kind of hard to teach when you don't have the books you need. These are the fights that we had, especially the progressive Democrats in the legislature, to push back. And thankfully, thanks to the work of folks like Chairman Mira and others, and people who represent teachers, we beat back a lot of those ill-conceived reforms, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud that Head Start, I'm even more proud of graduating from Head Start than I am from others, because I have lived what it means when you invest